Hey, what's good guys? This is NetBricks and today we're talking about AI. There's a ton of cool new things it can do. One of them is using it to increase the frame rate in stop motions. I've seen a load of clips of people increasing the frame rate of their films, as well as using it to increase the frame rate of some older movies which feature stop motion, and it looks pretty cool, so I wanted to give it a try to see if I can use it to improve my own LEGO stop motions. So basically the way that AI works is by interpolating your frames together and making new ones that will go in between the existing photos. By comparing and blending the frames that already exist, it will make a new one that breaches the gap and in theory makes it smoother. But theory will only take you so far, so let's put this to the test. In order to use this AI, you need an existing clip to feed into it. I decided to film a bunch of short, simple 12 FPS clips, each showcasing different components of stop motion to test out on the AI. For example, we've got some simple movements with not much ease in or out, like a minifigure walking or a car driving, then an action with a bit more extreme movement, one with some VFX, one with a bit of camera movement, and then one where I combined a bit of everything, a lot more like what one of my finished films would look like. This way we can see what it handles best. These are all shot at 12 frames per second, which is what I usually use, and I'm going to try increasing them to 24 and 60 FPS to see the results. 24 frames per second. So for 24 FPS, the original frame rate has now been doubled. This means the AI has only added one artificial frame per real photo. And I really like how this looks for the walking. It feels super smooth and there's very few noticeable defects. I'd say this one looks better than the original, to be honest. The car has added some weird defects around the wheels and where the car's in contact with the ground, so I'm not so sure about this one, but I think if I shot this better from an angle where you can't see the table, it would look a lot better. Next up is this guy throwing the wrench. When you play it back at full speed, it looks pretty good, but there's some weird kind of blurs going on. When I slow it down, it's really noticeable. On the figures, it works quite well, especially the guy falling. The blur from it merging the frames acts almost like motion blur, which unintentionally does look pretty good, but if you look at the wrench, it's doing some weird stuff. I think you can play it off as motion blur at full speed, but when you look at it frame by frame, yeah, that ain't it. I think it gets confused with the objects when they're moving really fast and a lot in between frames, which is definitely one of the biggest shortcomings of doing this. For the laser effect, I'd say this one's good as well. I can't notice any major defects and it looks a lot smoother. I think the movements are quite simple, which seems to be where this works really well. Onto camera movement. I really like this again. It's super simple movement and it just smooths it out really nicely. I was pretty happy with how I eased the camera in and out on the original, and it still follows that, so pretty much the same, just a bit smoother. That being said, when you really slow it down, you can notice some weird stuff happening with the studs at the bottom. I think this might be the same issue I had with the car and the table being quite textured. When you've got a lot of small details that are moving fast, it seems to have a hard time with them. Finally, onto the finished one. There's some elements of this that I do like. It smooths out for sure, but there's some defects. I think most of them can be passed off as motion blur, but with the flames, which have a lot of fast moving detail, it really smooths it out, but in a way that looks unnatural, like it's just blended into one big mess. On the plus side though, the blur on the debris flying off the car looks really cool. It makes it look like it's flying off a lot faster, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm starting to notice this works really well for certain things that are simpler, but not so good on the more complex parts. Though at 24 FPS, it's not too noticeable, so I'd give it a pass. Now, onto 60 frames per second. For 60 FPS, we're now at 5 times the original frame rate, so for every one real frame, there's 4 fake AI frames. First up, we've got the minifigure walk-in, and I can't lie, it looks pretty cool. I definitely think for this one, 24 FPS was probably the sweet spot here, because it kind of looks like his feet are phasing through some of the studs, but then at the same time it is kind of cool to see a minifigure walking this smooth in stop motion. So I guess this one's up to preference. I'll leave it up to you guys. For the car, it looks a bit unnatural, and the problems I have with the first one are amplified here, so it just looks weirder. Next up, the wrench. No. Bad. The laser one actually looks okay, it's just a bit too smooth for me. It doesn't really feel like a stop motion at this point, and you lose a bit of the charm. The camera movement holds up, one of the best, but at this high of a frame rate, it makes any little inconsistency with the original way more noticeable. Onto the car exploding, I'll start with the positives. The camera movement I think is still pretty solid, but yeah, I don't know, I'm just not a fan overall. I'd say that at 60 FPS, it kind of loses the charm of being a stop motion. It feels really unnaturally smooth and artificial, and you're also going to get a ton of these weird defects. I can't really think of any use of 60 FPS other than for like an experiment like this. I think it's just a bit overkill and kind of unnecessary. That being said, I think doubling it to 24 FPS could work for certain things, like scenes with not that much movement of characters just talking and camera movement, if you want it to be super smooth, that is. Anything with action or lots of movement though, I'd definitely say just stick to the original FPS. If you do animate in 24 FPS though originally, that's different. I'm just talking about using AI to boost it. I think for the most part, just animate in the frame rate you want it to be and learn how to master it, and it will always look better than anything that AI could do. Higher frame rates don't necessarily mean it's better. Just look at the Spider-Verse. They animate some stuff in 12 and it looks sick. So just have fun with it and animate in whatever frame rate you enjoy. If you guys do want to try it out, I'll post a link to the software I used in the description. It's called FlowFrame. Unfortunately, it's not available on Mac though. Also, I ran one of my other stop motions through at 60 FPS, so I'll play that back at the end if you want to watch it. Don't expect too much though guys. AI's got a lot of work to do before it takes over stop motion. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.